Call this meeting to order. Hold on, it's not working. I would like to call this meeting to order. If everybody would please mute their cell phones or turn them off. Father Matthew Graham is here to do the invocation. If everybody would please stand.
Let us pray. Father, we give you thanks and praise on this evening. We thank you for all that you give to us. We thank you for the gift of all who give their time and service to our community. We thank you for our elected officials and those who support them. And especially on an evening like this, Lord, we just ask the guidance of the Holy Spirit for all the things that we have to decide, but most especially we ask for the gift of wisdom, which has helped us to see beyond the things of this world, to see them as you do. The gift of counsel, a way of being able to talk and to explain, and especially the gift of understand your truth and the truth that is presented. Guide all who are here and guide their mission, guide their work, and thank you for this opportunity to help the people of our community. We ask all of this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Brian Clemens, would you please say the Pledge of Allegiance? Lead us.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Teal, can you call the roll?
Taylor is at 30.
Here.
Mr. Shavers?
Here.
Mr. Coates?
Here.
Mr. Watson?
Here.
Here.
I'm going to go ahead and recuse my chair spot at this meeting to another council member. I need a nomination for somebody.
I nominate John Mangus.
Second then.
All right. Call for the vote. All those in favor say yay.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposition? All right. Motion passes. Here you go.
Respond. Get your drink.
All right, thank you. For Father Matthew Graham, Immaculate Conception Church, to do the invocation. Thank you for the pledge. First thing that I would like to do is on the agenda, item number 6. Without being any objections, I would like to move item number 6 to item number 1. Are we okay with that?
I'm okay with that.
No objection.
No objection.
No objections?
Sounds good.
You okay with that, Mr. Watson?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to go into executive session right now. It's going to be the council at first, and then we'll invite others from the councilors.
A motion to go into executive. I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
Okay, we have a duly made motion and a second. All those in favor? Ms. Sandy?
I would like to make an amendment to that to bring a citizen in with us that may have some pertinent information regarding this case, and that'd be Hugh Harris.
We have to vote on that.
Any
I think
second?
the council needs to handle this part of it.
Let's just let us. What is the legality of that for him to come in back?
I'll make a substitute motion just to council go in, and if we need to come back out.
Yeah, it
Okay.
follows.
Well, then
So
we'll
it's
just go
same for the original motion, which is for us to go into executive session. Do we do that first?
That's fine.
And then if we come back?
If we need more information.
All right. Ms. Sandy, do we have to voice vote?
Yes.
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 Yes. Okay, we're going to go into executive session.
Channel 17, proudly serving the Florida parishes.
Livingston Parish Council for the special meeting, July 17th. We are now back in regular session.
I make a motion, we go back to regular meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. We're now back in regular session. No decisions were made during that time. So we're going to pick up the agenda, and it's my prerogative, if it's okay with the rest of the council, with number 4.
No objection.
Any objections?
None.
Okay. Number 4 is the introduction of an ordinance and/or emergency ordinance for development agreement for the Deer Run development and consideration thereof. Ms. Sandy, do you need to read that by title?
Proposed ordinance. Louisiana Revised
Miss
Statute
Sandy,
30.
your microphone.
Okay, it's read now. This will be proposed ordinance 24-20. It's an ordinance to adopt a proposed development agreement in accordance with Louisiana Revised Statute 334780.21 ex sequential for the Deer Run development, which is located in District 5 of Livingston Parish, State of Louisiana, properly advertised and noticed herein pursuant to the provisions of Louisiana Revised Statute 334780.28 for all purposes and in compliance with all requirements under Louisiana law for the same, including but not limited to those articulated in Louisiana Revised Statute 334780.21 et sequential between Livingston Parish Planning and Zoning Commission and the Livingston Parish Council and Ascension Properties, Inc., and authorize the parish president to execute the development agreement on behalf of the parish. The public hearing will be on Thursday, August 22nd at 6 p.m.
Okay.
I make the motion that we accept this introduction, simply an introduction, and set it for public hearing.
Anything else?
I will make a substitute motion that resolution that we requested to go back to the ordinance committee, or go to the ordinance committee as well, where we can have some public meetings to digest it for whenever it does come up for adoption.
Okay. Can we make that just as one
motion?
One motion.
I make a motion that we set this introduction and also send it back to the ordinance committee for some public meetings.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
I want to amend the motion. I want to amend the motion to send it to the ordinance committee to, it needs to go back there as per the council.
As a council rules.
Mm-hmm. And after we get it, we look at it through ordinance and get it back here for introduction, then we can set the adoption date. Because it's fluid until we...
Right, because there could be no more information that comes up. Also, the ordinance committee. First of all, let me ask Mr. Coates. Can the ordinance committee, are you okay with that?
Yes, I'm fine with that. That's our normal procedures for dealing with ordinances. So I think it's a good motion to put that forward, and ordinance could definitely do it. I'd appreciate if everyone would show up to the ordinance committee meeting so that we could try to hammer it all out and get it all taken care of quickly.
We do want to look at it and dig in.
All right.
We do.
So what is the actual ordinance, Mr. Goff?
There's a second amendment to the motion. Does she have a second yet?
What was the amendment again?
That's what we got to vote on.
All right, now.
I think we just changed.
Basically, I amended the motion, send it to the ordinance committee, because it's an ordinance, and remove the adoption and public hearing date from the table because that's undetermined.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Goff?
If there's a second on the motion, we'll discuss it. But until then, I have nothing to say.
Okay, do we have a second on
Read the motion one more time.
Yeah.
We back and forth so much here that
Right.
You know, hey,
Ladies,
I'm having
can
trouble
you read
turning
it
the pages.
one more
you know?
time?
Aaron, you just want to send it back first to the ordinance committee first, for
Yes,
starters.
yes. And
And then we
remove
go-
the adoption, the public hearing date, the adoption and public hearing date.
That's where we're at right now.
But we have to introduce it first.
But it's got to come back here once it makes it to the ordinance committee and we get to look at it there. Then it comes back here for introduction. That's our policy. That's how our ordinances are written. And then once it passes here, then it can move on. It comes here in its final form for introduction.
That's in the charter.
That's in the charter. And so after that, then we can accept the introduction and move it up to adoption and public hearing. If we need
Since everybody else seems to have something to say about it, I'll go ahead and speak out of
Yes.
turn since we don't have a second. But basically, none of this is standard, and we haven't followed that exact every time, which, it's discretion, as we stated before in open meeting, that's what our wishes are and what we would like for that to happen. I think we have some time-sensitive things. I don't know if the attorneys need to interject into that, but we're doing both things here. The introduction is simply that. It's an introduction of a document. It can be changed from 1 word to 1,000 words to 100,000 words at the public meeting. We're also going to send it back to the ordinance committee so they can digest it and make any suggestions and recommendations that this council looks into at that public hearing. Even if it goes back to the ordinance committee and they make changes, it is not in its permanent format until this council approves it that night. So it's a living, breathing document, and all we're doing is introducing it, that this is a document tonight, and on this particular time, it will be approved in whatever the format it is at that time. So we're really getting...
Semantic.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I agree.
So,
I think, but the point that I'm trying to say is we can't introduce it when it's not in its final form.
We want to make it
ordinance
public.
is in its final form. It's
All right,
in
I'll
it-
second.
It's in
All right. So you second?
Yep.
All right.
So no ordinance is ever in its final form until it gets approved as an ordinance. Right, Mr. Dean?
Let's ask Mr.
Am
Moody.
I correct?
1 second.
Sure.
I think your charter does require it to be a written out ordinance. Now, could it be? It's subject to change between the introduction and final adoption. But you can't make substantive changes after it's been advertised. So you can make some changes around the margins after it's been advertised and introduced at final adoption. But you should leave those to just minor changes.
So if we send it to the ordinance committee, what can the ordinance committee change if they wish?
Well, I assume you're sending it there for them to study it and make recommendations back to the council.
And for the public to be able to weigh in and see it.
So I don't know. I haven't studied this ordinance. It may be in final adoption form now. I don't know that.
It's pretty close. I'm just very concerned about the timeline. And if our attorney, I don't care if it goes back to ordinance committee and sits there and comes back and then adopt it, as long as our timeline and our ordinance and this federal judge and federal court is we're meeting what we need to meet. And as long as this attorney, Mr. Steve, stands up at that podium, if you would, sir, if you would take a spot at that podium and says we're going to be okay.
We'll get him in just a minute. That's item number 1. All right. So we have a motion and a second. That's for the substitute motion. And let's be honest, they're basically the same thing. We're going to announce this, what Miss Sandy read, right?
We're not introducing it, according to what I understood.
Ms. Aaron doesn't want to introduce it. She wants to send it back.
It's not in its final form.
She wants to send it back to ordinance. Mr. Ricky wants to introduce it and send it back to ordinance.
Okay, then we got to vote on the substitute motion first.
And I would like to hear from the attorneys so we all have our good information on what we're voting on. And is this going to cause us a kink in our litigation side of it?
Okay. Then let's,
I appreciate that. I really do.
I don't
But
want
I
to
would
cause
like
a kink. I don't want to cause a kink. I don't know why you would
I
say
haven't
that,
been
Ricky.
sitting in the meetings, but I would like to hear it from Mr. Steve and whatever Mr. Randy has to say, but with Mr. Steve, are we going to be in a timeline problem if we do not introduce this? It just takes a long time to introduce an ordinance and then adopt it, and
litigation.
okay, can you step up to the microphone, please, and introduce yourself?
Yeah. Steve Irving, I'm development counsel for the parish. It does, and it will create a time crunch specifically for this reason. There are time delays built into the process, and we are jammed by the litigation itself. This process, this ordinance has to get introduced. To get adopted as an ordinance, it has to lay over for 14 days. So that 14 days does not start to run unless it's introduced tonight. For a development agreement, there are specific advertising requirements and specific hearing requirements, because there is a hearing that has to be done before the Planning and Zoning Commission and a hearing that must be done in front of the council. Those two can be simultaneous. But if it's not introduced tonight, there is no way to meet the time requirements to get this done. Period.
Mr. Moody, can we introduce it and the ordinance, send it to the ordinance committee, and then the ordinance committee, if in light of new information or anything from citizens, the public, can they make changes to it?
Yeah. No, I don't know what the overall scheme with is respect to whether this was something in negotiation as part of the settlement of the lawsuit and how much parameters you'll have. But you could certainly, you could introduce it tonight and ask the ordinance committee to have some emergency meetings over the next week or so. I mean, that's another option, but.
Mr. Chairman, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Some of the discussion said that the ordinance wasn't in a form to be introduced. A word was used, final form. There's no such word in the ordinance. The ordinance description, page 10, section 212, ordinances in general. All proposed ordinances shall be introduced in writing at a meeting of the council in the form. It didn't say final form. It says in a form required for adoption and except for codifications. The operating budget and the capital improvement budget shall be confined to one subject, expressed clearly on the title. That's Part A. Part B, all proposed ordinances shall be read by title when introduced and published in the official journal by title within 10 days after introduction. Except the ordinance proposing amendments to the charter shall be published in full, except as otherwise provided in a section on emergency ordinances. No ordinance shall be considered for final passage until at least 2 weeks from the date of introduction and after a public hearing has been held on the ordinance. With the final approval of ordinances by the president, which is C now, or the council, in the case of a veto by the president, such enacted ordinances shall be published in full or in summary at the council's discretion in the official journal by the clerk of the council within 15 days after adoption. Every enacted ordinance, unless it shall specify another date, shall become effective at the expiration of 15 days after final adoption. What this Home Rule Charter said, word for word, is the ordinance has been introduced in the form required to go forward.
But it doesn't have to be in final form, so then it can be changed.
Yes, sir.
All right. So do you want to, would you then, Ms. Sandifer, want to remove your amendment?
Send it to the ordinance committee?
No, that, to not introduce it. Because according to this, we can introduce it.
My concern, it is a 21-page ordinance that we got roughly at noon.
12:50. Yeah.
12:50. And that's a little, I don't know, input.
It's hard to digest that in that short period of time.
Yeah. I don't like to just willy-nilly, you know. I mean, it's important. It's important to work on this and get it right.
Then that's why we send it to the ordinance committee, and that gives the ordinance committee and the people time to publish it. And then we're going to hear from the attorneys in items number 1, 2, and 3.
I think you're getting confused, Chairman, is that what Ms. Aaron is wishing to do is not introduce this in any format, and the clock doesn't start. Our attorney just said that it is crucial that it gets introduced. If it's introduced, our other attorney said that it can be changed. The parish president read the charter in reference to ordinances by word, and it says nothing about a final form. So this is an ordinance that has all the nuts and bolts in it, but we might have forgot a washer or a keeper or something. And we're going to introduce it tonight in the form that it's in, and then it still can go back to the ordinance committee, and it still can have all the discussion about it. This council has 30-plus days to read it word for word while they're sitting in their recliner or sitting by the pool or whatever it is. And then you can bring all your changes or wishes or desires to the ordinance committee and have a say right there. And then that ordinance committee can put that in a written format and bring it to this council at that public hearing that the rest of the parish is going to know about it as well. And then we're going to vote yes or no on those changes.
Mr. Goff?
And then it'll be approved. So.
I think you've convinced us. Ms. Hannaford, do you want to remove?
I'll withdraw my vote.
All right.
What is the date you want to go?
I think she mentioned. Did you mention a date to set the public hearing?
Yes, it'll be August 22nd at 6 p.m. It's got to be published.
It's got to go through the days. Yeah. Yeah.
Mr. Coates, will that give you enough time to have a ordinance committee meeting?
On August 22nd, yes, absolutely.
Okay, wait, I have just one question. How were we going to publish that in the paper if we...
It'll be published 3 times.
It's got to go for publication once it's introduced. But if we send it to the ordinance committee and we change it, this is not the normal way we do it.
Any substantive change would have to be re-advertised.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there may be substantive changes if there's new information comes out. But I think we can, just my opinion, I think we can introduce it tonight. So we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Goff now, and a second. Who was our second?
Shavers.
Mr. Shavers?
Mr. Shavers.
Just to make sure, that is to introduce it, then onto the ordinance.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Sandy, can you call for the vote? All right.
Yeah, public comment.
Yes, public comment.
Brian Clemens, 34332 Robbie Lee Drive. As I'm reading, it says consideration of a proposed ordinance or emergency ordinance by duly authorized vote of the planning agency. Are you going to write an ordinance that tells the planning commission how they're going to vote? Is that what we're doing?
Mr. Irving, can you answer that?
Yes, sir. This is tracking the statute on development agreements, which the legislature has created, and in the legislative process, it includes both a vote by the Planning and Zoning Commission and a vote by the council, and multiple advertisements. All of this is set out in the statute.
So the Planning Commission would have a chance to vote?
Yes, the Planning Commission will have a vote. They will have a hearing. It may have to be joint with the council or on the same day as the one from the council, but yes, there will be a vote by the Planning Commission. It's going to be the advertising for a development agreement is essentially the same as what you have to do for a zoning ordinance. It is a very, very detailed advertising requirement. It has to be advertised 3 times, and at least 10 days must pass between the first advertisement and the hearing. So that's the reason that the time delay creates a crunch when the back end of this is the trial on July 29th.
Okay, but this is not, just for a point of correction here, this is not going to be settled past approved before the end of that
You are correct.
lawsuit.
And I was going to explain, and I can do it now if you want, because there are other parts to this which I think will be helpful to everybody. The settlement that's being envisioned is a settlement agreement with a relatively simple injunction, the possibility of paying them some money, but probably in the next fiscal year and not in this one, and potentially covered by insurance. But under the terms of what's being discussed in the settlement agreement, and this will eventually be brought to the council as a resolution to authorize President DeLatte to sign it, and which doesn't have all of these complications. But ultimately, under the terms of the settlement agreement that's being discussed, the parish council would ultimately have an option. And the option is going to be they can approve this development agreement, in which case it will replace the existing settlement that was confected last year, and will include some changes that are going to be very, very beneficial to the council. If the council chooses not to do that, it will have the option that the new injunction would still be in effect, but they can remain under the settlement as it occurred last year. So that ultimately, that's going to be the decision the council has to make.
Mr. Clemens, did that answer any of your questions? Because I have another question for you.
Not really. As I read it, what we're doing here is introducing an ordinance to tell the planning commission how to vote.
Because, Mr. Irving, what happens if the planning commission doesn't vote for it?
Ultimately, the planning commission will make a recommendation to the council for a development agreement. And what they will produce is a recommendation which the council will have to consider and decide whether they want to go with that recommendation or go a different way. I'm sorry it's that way, but that is literally what the state statute says, and that's the one thing we have to follow is the state statute.
Mr. Moody, are you familiar with this state statute?
Not really. I haven't.
Not to put you on the spot. And thank you for coming tonight.
I'm aware of development agreements, but I'd have to look at the statute with respect to who has to pass it and when. I do know it needs to go to both bodies. I don't know if it comes as an approval of the planning commission or a recommendation, but I don't know that.
Mr. Irvin, what happens if the planning commission turns it down? What happens then?
If the planning commission turns it down, it would their recommendation to not adopt it would come to the council, and the council would consider it and ultimately decide whether it wants to accept the recommendation of the planning commission or whether it would like to approve the ordinance. Well, like I said before, the council is going to have, under the terms of the settlement that's being envisioned in here, the council will ultimately have an option to go either way. All we're doing tonight is preserving the option for the council to go with the development agreement. That's all this is preserving it, and down the line, ultimately, there will be other discussions. The resolution on the issue of authorizing President DeLatte to sign the settlement agreement, we expect to come up in front of the council on the regular meeting on the 25th.
Okay, yes.
Do we have a development agreement?
You will have a development agreement if, after the process is over with, you pass this ordinance. If you choose not to pass this ordinance, you will remain in the same situation that you were in under the settlement agreement that was made last year, and with such additional injunctions as result either by our agreement or whatever the court does. But this is not about deciding this issue tonight. Nobody's being asked to decide this issue tonight. This is about getting the process going so that ultimately the council can exercise the option that's going to come down the road to proceed or not to proceed. Because my expectation is, since the development agreement would absolutely, there's no way to get a development agreement in place before the hearing on the 29th because of the things that has to happen. So what I envision and what I think is going to happen is in the settlement agreement side of it, the council will have a window of 30 days to decide whether it wants to pass the development agreement or not pass the development agreement.
Okay. Is there anybody else? Thank you, Mr. Irving. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak for or against this? Mr. Sandifer, Mr. Harris put his hand up first. Please state your name and...
Yeah. Henry Harris, 36081, Highway 1036, Holden. And I just have a question for clarification. I don't really know here. He's talking about it going to the Planning Commission to come back with a recommendation to y'all. Is it understood, or is it clear, is it expressed? Is that recommendation to be based on how it affects under normal rules of the Planning Commission, or based on settling litigation?
Mr. Irving?
It would be based upon the normal rules of the Planning Commission to hold a hearing and reach whatever decision that the Planning Commission chooses to make, and then bring that decision to the council for the council to consider. There is no commitment whatsoever as to how the Planning Commission is going to vote, and no commitment whatsoever as how the council is ultimately going to vote. That option we clearly preserved in the discussions, because this development agreement is the current form of it, but it's actually been discussed continually since we had the mediation of this case, and there have been multiple drafts of it which have been circulated to the individuals on the committee. So yes, there are things in this one that there are little tweaks, but we basically had this thing set for. And one other thing, since Mr. Harris just talked, one of the things that's in the development agreement is that it doesn't go into effect if they do not have merchantable title to the property. And if they don't get merchantable title to the property, it never goes into effect.
Is that a sufficient answer for you, Mr. Harris?
Is that in the negotiation?
Yes, that was in the negotiations.
It's written in it?
And there's actually a provision in it that limits the things that can be done on the site in advance of the adoption of the development agreement, to putting in the culvert under the DOTD. And there's a few other things they can do that are engineering-wise on the site. They can do their planning. But in terms of any work on the site, that is held in abeyance under the terms of the development agreement until they have merchantable title to the property and the development agreement goes into effect.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Sandifer, I think you wanted to speak.
Jamie Sandifer, 24411 Oma Harris Lane. Just a note of caution, what I heard there is basically, no, you're not going to tell the Planning Commission how to vote. You're basically just going to take away their ability to vote. They get nothing but a recommendation now. What I heard, there was a resolution passed by this council saying that the normal order of things is to go to ordinance committee, then to the council. You members of the committee voted on, or the council voted that way. So we're suspending that normal order. This sounds a lot like this is a done deal. We're going to push it through as fast as we can, and we're just observing the formality. And that, I think, is what we're seeing out here. And so I just want to caution y'all that that's what's gone on for a lot of years in this parish, and that's what we don't want to see anymore. So, thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have anybody in the council that wants to address that? Well, I'll just say that I very much understand your opinion there, Mr. Sandifer. I can say that for me, I can't speak for the rest of the council. It's not a formality. We do want to do as much due diligence as possible. And I think sending it to the ordinance committee is a way to do that. And also the people get more chances to weigh in on it. Yes, sir.
one of the reasons for going the development agreement route as a possible conclusion of that side of this is because the process is lengthy, it is advertised, it involves hearings, it is the most transparent of all the different ways this could be done. That is why we're going the development agreement route. The development agreement route is unusual for Livingston Parish. I don't know that it's ever been done before. One of my suggestions that's going to come down the pike is that for every subdivision that's of any size, maybe over 50 lots, that the council should require them to have a development agreement where the developer has to come in, they have to go to the parish president, they have to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they have to go to the council to get a development agreement approved before you get in a situation where somebody's got a plat and they're charging ahead and trying to build it.
Right, and that's, from what I understand, that's used in St. Tammany Parish?
It
is very common. In most places, they have a very complicated and well-developed zoning and planning code. That's a way to put a lot of detail and require the developer to meet all the promises. So it's very common.
How does that fit in with the master plan? Because the master plan is supposed to, all developments need to be connected through the master plan.
It should be consistent with your master plan and, of course, your zoning ordinance.
Mr. Clemens, do you have anything to say on the master plan? Or Mr. Sandifer?
I am chairman of the Master Plan Review Commission. We're a glorified coffee club. Okay, the Planning Commission is the one to address the master plan. I think Ms. Long is the chairman of the Planning Commission.
Can you come up to the microphone, please? For the TV audience. It's must watch TV.
The long chairman of the Planning Commission, and he's correct that it goes through the Planning Commission. The master plan, that's where the official approval once goes through the committee, and the committee makes that process.
And the developmental agreement is fine with the master plan? There's not an issue with that?
I don't think it's been established to that point. We're still everything. We actually are even looking at, I think it was graded today, as a matter of fact, for as far as potential companies that would help develop that. So we expect probably within the next year, everything will be completed. I'm sure we'll have those answers as we move forward.
Okay, last question I have. Thank you, Ms. Long. How does what we're trying to do with zoning with Mr. Forney and that group that we've hired, does this fit in with that as well?
It will totally fit in with that. In the land development process, there are two different processes that go on. One of them, and the part that the master plan is involved in, is in zoning. Zoning is a pre-decided conclusion about what uses can be made of property. So the property can be totally undeveloped, but it can still be zoned to be for particular use or uses. So that's the decision that's involved in zoning. That's what the master plan is about. Separate and apart from that is the planning process. In the planning process, the decision that's being made is dividing the property into lots. It is where the streets are going to be, how the streets are going to be laid out, what the requirements are for the streets, what the entrances are for it, the load that it places on infrastructure. Those are the things that are in the planning process. The development agreement would be on the planning side, making those decisions. Ultimately, the piece of property would still have to have the required zoning in order to do whatever they're deciding to do.
Okay. Do we have any more? Thank you. Do we have any more?
Gary
Please,
Talbot,
please.
35002 Ben Road. So you're telling me that on the 25th, you're going to come before this council with an agreement that to settle the Ascension and the Parish Council lawsuit as it exists today? I mean, that's what I understood. And yet, you think that they're going to agree to that without a consent decree on what's going to happen, and that y'all are going to be able to vote at a later date to determine if you're going to let them build a subdivision or not?
Mr. Talbot,
I mean, I'm just trying to figure out. I mean, it seems to me that if you're going to vote to settle, which it's obviously from yesterday when Judge Dick said she didn't trust the parish 4 times, that she obviously feels that the parish is not negotiating good faith with Ascension Properties, which, they've been on the right side of this thing from the beginning. It seems to me that what we're doing here is we're talking about a settlement agreement and a consent decree and a plan of action on how we're going to let planning determine and the council determine. You can't settle a lawsuit on the 25th and then come back at the end of August to determine whether you're going to let them build it or not. There's going to be a consent decree where they're going to build it if you settle it on the 25th. Let's just be honest about that.
All right. Mr. Irving, or does anybody from the administration want to address this?
I think Mr. Irving can address clarify him the best.
I'm going to begin with what the present situation is, because it is from here that we go. Ascension Properties has a preliminary plat approved for the Deer Run development. They have construction plans that have been approved, albeit with not correctly filing them with the parish. For the first phase of it, they have multiple other phases that have been filed. The only impediment, as we stand here today, the only impediment on the parish side from them starting construction of Deer Run is the payment for $4,000 and something in fees that are owed the parish that were not collected when the previous president signed it. So that is the issue in terms of the development being built. That's all they have to do, and they can have if they're willing to take the risk right now, that is all they have to do to have earth moving equipment on the property tomorrow. Now, they got to have a pre-construction meeting, but that's a foregone deal. So they can build it right now, and the outcome of the litigation in federal court is not about whether they can build it or not.
It's about the injunction.
It's the injunction in federal court is not about whether they can build it or not. The issue in federal court is what the parish needs to be stopped from doing to stop interfering with it illegally in violation of the previous agreement and the court's orders. So the downside, every downside on what's going on in the case in federal court is on the downside for the parish, not the downside for them.
Right.
In fact, if we go to court and have a crushing victory in the case in federal court, and we get their case totally thrown out, the parish is still going to be subject to the previous settlement agreement. The parish is still going to be in a situation where if they walk in and pay $4,000, they can have their construction permit and they can start development. That will make no difference. Now, the only thing that we have discussed that makes, on the parish side, that makes any difference to that is that if Ascension Properties is going to agree to be bound by that development agreement, if the parish chooses to also adopt the settlement agreement, the development agreement. Yeah.
So we don't
if
have
the parish chooses to also adopt that, then there will be commitments that are very favorable to the parish that are better than what the current situation is. And I'll be glad to discuss those. Tonight might not be the time to go through that, but there are numerous provisions.
Okay.
Absolutely, they will be an opportunity after if we accept the basic settlement, the legal side of the settlement on the 25th by resolution, then the parish will absolutely have an ultimate opportunity, once all the process has gone through, to make a decision that says, yes, we want the benefits of this development agreement, or no, we'd rather stay under the settlement that was done previously.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have anybody else who wishes to speak for or against this?
I just want to say something. I would like to hopefully get a commitment from Steve and Marty that in the future, it seems, well, let me speak presently and past. Every time Deer Run comes up, we get last minute information. And I think communication between us and you guys is very important. And I think you both can agree with that. Can you make a commitment to us tonight that going forward, anytime Deer Run is on the agenda for a council meeting or a special meeting, that we have ample information, as much information as we can, to process all of this?
You directed that at me, and I'm going to address it.
Okay.
What's in that resolution, what's in that ordinance tonight is exactly the same development agreement that we've been talking about for the past 3 to 4 weeks. And every time it was amended, every time it was redlined, we emailed it to you guys. Every time. It's taken that development agreement, and it's the vast majority of that ordinance. There's a little bit of introduction in there, but the vast majority of that ordinance is the same development agreement that we've been talking about for a month now. It's the same one that we dealt with in the settlement conference, that we had to go in the back with the judge and tweak it. The very next morning, we got the red lines on that, and those got emailed to y'all. Nobody's hiding the ball from you guys.
I didn't claim that, Mr.
I know,
Marty.
but that's the way I took it.
Okay.
All right. So we have done our very best to communicate immediately when changes were made with all you guys, with everybody. And I'm sorry if maybe you're not getting the emails, but we have sent every version, Mr. Shavers, of...
Who are you sending it to, Mr. Marty?
Some of them, sometimes it goes to Sandy and she spreads them around. Sometimes we send them to you guys as a group email directly. Sometimes they go to the 3 committee members that were involved in the process. But whoever was appropriate to get it, the minutia, as we went through it, got it. But Aaron's asked me about that a few times.
But I think
Sanders asked me about that a few times.
Mr. Shavers?
But I think, Mr. Marty, you can agree the last time we met at the council meeting, that was very short notice. And I think you even agreed to that in the executive session and said, I do agree this is short notice and I apologize. That's all I'm trying to improve is our communication line.
And I respect
look,
that.
Maybe it is on us that we're not getting the emails. Maybe I'm not pointing the finger at anybody. I'm not a last second kind of person. I can't operate that way. And
I appreciate that. And we got the settlement for that last conference that we had together. We got the settlement agreement. We got that development agreement the day before. And we gave it to you guys within 12 hours of getting it. So hold on, Steve. The process itself, they put a lot of pressure on us with this litigation. There have been a lot of deadlines, a lot of pressure moving through this process. And we have done our absolute best to get you the information as soon as we possibly had it. There's no interest on our part, Steve and I, anybody, Randy, there's no interest on our part of holding anything back. It's a moving target. We have amended it multiple times, and every time there's been a little tweak, and most of the tweaks have been in your favor, by the way. All those were negotiated, and y'all guys got fed that information. So go ahead, Steve.
I think the direct answer to your question is we were distributing copies of a lot of this to the committee that was appointed by the council. Henceforth, for the duration of this, we will distribute whatever we get to be distributed. Separate by us, will email it to all of the council members. You will see it.
Are you okay with that, Mr.
Absolutely.
Shavers?
And if somebody's got questions about it, everybody's got my phone number. You can call me and ask it. I will try to get. One thing I will try to do is give everybody the same answer to the same question, which is the best I can do.
Okay. Mr. Coates?
I would like to agree with Mr. Shavers on the timeliness, and not to kick a dead horse again, but let's just try to make sure that we get things as soon as possible, because a lot of us like to do research before we make any kind of decisions. And that's the same thing with this process. I understand y'all are moving fast because y'all said that. However, we're trying to do what's right for the people and make sure that we negotiate a good deal for them. So we need time to do that. We don't need it be fire hosed on us. And at the last minute, we're trying to make a decision, trying to absorb information.
Right.
That's not the way we need to be doing this.
Which was
this
a direct
process.
result of the panel abolishing, because nobody was prepared to have to be on that panel. I mean, that was a direct result of last minute information.
Sure. Well, like I say, we will send copies.
Thank you.
To everybody on each occasion that there's something to send out. We will answer your questions, and just don't everybody call me at one time and have an illegal meeting, but we will answer your questions.
Thank you.
All right. Any more further questions? Yes.
Yeah, I have a statement to make in light of the.
1 second, Mr. Harris. Ms. Enver.
Come on up, Mr. Harris. In light of the conversation that just happened, yet we have a ordinance on our desk, a 21-page ordinance that we got at around noon today to execute a development agreement, and we don't have a development agreement, and that's just very confusing and very last minute. And so that's all I have to say, Mr.
Okay. 1 second, Ms. Crosby. Mr. Harris.
I just want the record to be clear, because this is confusion.
Can you state your name again for the record?
Henry Harris, 36081 Highway 1036, Holden. And Mr. Irving just said they pay the $4,000. They go to the pre-construction meeting, and that's just a formality. And your pre-construction meeting by ordinance has to be with the owners of the property. And I do not understand how that's a formality when you can't delineate which owners come to that meeting. And I would like the record clear on that.
Maybe that's why they haven't come to the meeting yet and paid the $4,000.
That may be, but everybody is just saying that his position was you go into the settlement or you don't go into the settlement. All they owe is $4,000. Go to the meeting. That's easy done. Doesn't matter. And they put equipment on the land tomorrow. And I don't understand how they can have that pre-construction meeting and comply with your ordinances. And I can't get anybody to give me an answer on that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Crosby.
Abby, 19866 LA Highway 42, Livingston, Louisiana 70754. Ms. Sandiford just made a statement about not getting the information until 12. You said it was 12:50. So thank you for being correct on that. So this is new to y'all, what y'all got this afternoon at 12. And at 6 o'clock, y'all supposed to have done y'all's research on it and everything and made sure everything was perfectly done. Am I correct?
You're correct.
The wording on it was supposed to be done, and y'all were supposed to make a sound decision on something. I am talking to them. Is that the question? Is that?
We were to digest this within 5 hours.
Right.
I don't see as.
But we're not adopting it. We're only.
It's just an introduction.
Introducing it, and then.
Do you really know what you're introducing? That's the question.
We read it.
You read it, but do you fully understand every word verbatim?
I don't know if I understand anything verbatim.
I haven't had time to read it.
I haven't had time to read it either.
I read the whole thing,
So
but I'm not an attorney.
By agreeing to this, you're not doing your due diligence to the people that you represent by adopting this without fully understanding what you're signing.
We're not adopting it.
Or putting it up for this, if you haven't read it and fully understand it and what you're bringing.
All right, 1 second. Mr. Moody, introducing it doesn't mean that we're adopting anything, so that makes it public. So now the public can see it. If we don't introduce it, it's questionable whether or not we can make it public.
But to me, as a layperson, it looks like y'all are giving it a sign of approval if you make it go this far. If you take it to the next level, that y'all send it to the planning. I'm just talking as a layperson, not a council.
but that's what it makes it look like, that y'all are giving it a stamp of approval.
I agree with you, Abby, wholeheartedly. But in defense of what we're doing tonight, we're just introducing it, and then it can make several changes down the road from the introduction. This is a federal lawsuit, and we just need to show that we're willing to do this in good faith.
Yes.
And it does need to go to the ordinance committee, and it does need to have changes, I'm sure. But I agree with you on us getting this last minute. I'm with you 100%. But this is just to show that we're willing to negotiate in good faith.
So every time that something is changed, does it come back to y'all and then y'all approve it and then it goes back? And then that has to be advertised again? Because this could go on for months.
I agree with you. That's a question, I guess, for Mr. Moody.
With my councilmen, with other councilmen too. So this is something that I find very concerning, because I like to stay informed of what's going on, because it affects my community, my family, my grandchildren, everything. It affects my pocketbook as a tax. So I just want to make sure that, see if y'all fully understood what y'all were sending forward.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, do we have any? Yes.
President Delat wanted me to try to...
Excuse me, can you say your name and address?
Julie Quinn, attorney for Livingston Parish Government, along with Steve Irving and Marty Maley, 112 Founders Drive, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810. To the lady, I want to try to answer. I know it was answered earlier, but I fully understand her concern. I'm going to go over it for the benefit of her and everyone else one more time.
Ms. Quinn, please address us.
I'm so
Thank
sorry. I felt like I was rudely turning my back to her, but I know I need to address the council, and I apologize. The trick bag that this government is in is the fact that the trial is July 29th. That's a hard and fast date. There's nothing anyone can do about it, and that trial is not changing. That trial date is July 29th. This settlement conference that was court-ordered was last Wednesday. I don't have that date in front of me. But last Wednesday, this council, through its committee, spent until, I believe, after 8 p.m., after it closed, the courthouse closed, in the dark, trying to hammer out a settlement agreement. I want to reiterate again, I know that Mr. Irving did, but I will say again, a win at trial, which seems an uphill battle, if you would have been in court the other day, an uphill battle, a win puts this council back under the August 2023 consent judgment, where the Deer Run development can proceed without any of the protections that are proposed in this particular settlement. So it's really not a win-win. It's probably more aptly described as a lose-lose, except for a few handful of people. However, when you're between a rock and a hard place, you have to make the best decision that you can. And that's where this community finds itself. As far as the time frame, the unfortunate time frame, again, and I'm just repeating, Mr. Irving did state this, so I'm certainly not implying that he didn't explain this. I'm just going to go over it one more time, since some members of the audience did, were there's a lot of information being poured out at one time. I understand. The trial is July 29th. The settlement conference was last Wednesday. That draft proposed, we're going to call it a settlement agreement for lay people's purposes. It's referred to as a development agreement, but that is one part of the settlement. That is the state statutory term for an agreement entered into with a developer to proceed with a development. That is part of the settlement process. After last Wednesday's settlement conference, court-ordered settlement conference, that development agreement was confected. The only way a settlement agreement can be approved is through a process that this council is familiar. There are time delays for that process. You introduce it, you lay over for 2 weeks, and then you approve or disapprove it. The trick bag that this council finds itself in is the fact that the trial is July 29th. There's not 14 days between now, and the 29th. So that's why the special session was called. And if it's not introduced tonight, it is impossible to approve that development agreement before the trial. So if you don't approve the development agreement before the trial, you're going to go to trial. If you win, you're back under the old consent judgment. If you lose, probably even worse. So what the council is doing tonight, and I applaud you, is keeping that door open. You're not approving anything, and I understand each and every one of you would typically not introduce something that you haven't had the opportunity to vet and decide and review and ask. And I understand how it may look, but I applaud all of you for making a tough decision in light of your constituents and how controversial this is. But you're doing the right thing by keeping that door open, introducing it tonight, and then studying it, because it's the only way that it can possibly be approved. And if you decide not to approve it and go to trial, you have that option. But the only way that option is open right now is if you introduce it tonight. So I understand the difficulty, and I understand why your constituents might be frustrated, but I do want to defend the council that you're making the right decision tonight.
All right. Thank you. Are we,
Ms. Quinn.
any more questions? Are we good? This closes the public hearing. All right. We have a motion on the floor, and it's duly seconded. Ms. Sandy, can you read the motion?
The motion is to introduce the ordinances 24-20 and set the public hearing and send the ordinance to the ordinance committee.
Okay. Did we hear that? All right.
Do we have that time to do that?
Do we have the time to do that?
I think we're doing the best. We're doing the very best. We are trying to work.
I understand. I'm really, I just want to know if we got that time to do that.
Well, we're showing good faith.
We still have to follow our laws and ordinances and state statutes.
Dean, when's the next ordinance meeting?
In answer to your question, the way everything is put together, we will have the time to do it. And the reason is because the total settlement's got two pieces. The other one is going to be the thing we come before you with a resolution on the 25th. If we pass the resolution on the 25th, then we will have a 30-day period after that to adopt the development agreement. We will have already set up the hearing process would have to happen because of the way it has to be advertised and everything. So the reason we need to do this tonight is because there would not be enough time to have those hearings if we wait till the 25th. We need to start the process now. And it's we've carefully considered the timeline that has to go here. It's fanatically complex, but we need to start this process tonight. We will be back before you on the 25th with the other part of this, which is going to be it's going to be called a settlement agreement, but it's actually going to be pretty simple, and it will have in it, we believe, it's not final yet, but we believe it'll have in it the clear 30-day period to consider the development agreement, and for the parish to do with the development agreement whatever it feels is appropriate. Okay. And the two will not, the settlement agreement can happen, and the parish still reject the development agreement.
All right, council, do we have enough information? Mr. Watts, did that answer your question enough? You made it clear as mud?
We introduced an ordinance tonight, what we doing, correct?
Right. And sending it to the ordinance
committee.
As per our rules.
And send it.
And sending it.
Yes.
That's a two-part.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Miss Sandy, can you call for the vote?
Mr. Artie?
Oh, wait.
He just stepped out.
Mr. Shavers?
To introduce it, ordinance, yes.
Mr. Coates?
Yes.
Mr. Sandifer? Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mr. Mangus?
Yes. Miss Ertie's back. Do you want to vote yes or no for introducing the ordinance and sending it to the ordinance committee?
Yes.
All right. So that passes. Okay. That being passed, thank you for that, the public and attorneys. Now we move to number 1 on the agenda.
I think we already got that.
I think we kind of satisfied that. Mr. Moody, would you say?
No, I think it would be, you can discuss it at the next meeting when it comes up, too.
Right. So I think number 2 and number 3?
I'll move, yeah.
Yeah, I'll move. Okay.
Adjourn. Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
We got 5, 6, and 7.
I'm sorry?
They did 6.
Oh, they did all that.
We did 6, yeah?
Get 6 first.
We did 6 first, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nobody yet.
Do we have a second? You second? Okay. We have a motion to adjourn.
Yes.
It's seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned.